Chapter 1. Celeste and Perry Danton stood on the deck of the Marie Lavalliere as the ship moved up the Mississippi River, drawing closer and closer to New Orleans. "It will not be long now," Perry said, speaking with the authority which came from having been privileged to hold conversations with the sailors ever since the ship had sailed from France 2 weeks ago. "To be sure," his sister agreed, trying to overcome her envy. She herself had not been as lucky as Perry. Mamma thought it unladylike for a girl to trail after sailors all the time. However, Celeste must admit Perry was correct in his statement, for anyone could see that a city lay spread out in the distance, and beyond a doubt it would be New Orleans, since that was their present destination. Perry stood as straight and tall as possible. His young American cousin, Charles Bonneville, whom he had not seen for 3 years, was sure to be waiting for him on the dock. At the time of his cousin's visit in France, Perry had been a fraction of an inch the taller of the two. He had grown since then, but so, in all likelihood, had Charles. It was well to be prepared. "Look!" Perry cried. "We shall hit land! We cannot avoid it!" He glanced sideways at his sister as he spoke, not really expecting to fool her. Still, it was worth an attempt. Indeed, it did look as if the ship might run into dry land, so great was the bend in the river. Celeste pretended not to hear. Perry had always tried to tease her. Mamma explained he did not do it to be mean. It was only because he was a boy, and 14 to her 12. Mamma said the best way to handle the situation was to ignore the teasing. This Celeste had tried to do, but not always with success. She was glad now that she had not answered Perry, for the pilot, who was evidently a smart man, skillfully guided the ship so that it followed the curve of the river. "It is very warm," she remarked, changing the subject. This was indeed true. Although only the 1st of May, it felt like summer. She would be much more comfortable if she took the jacket off of her suit, but this she hesitated to do. Coming to America for the first time was a truly great occasion. It was well to be dressed in one's best. No, she would keep the jackets on, and the Breton hat with its streamers. Her hair gave her trouble. 2 plaits, each tied with the blue ribbon, were supposed to hang down her back. But every time she turned her head, one or both of them bounced over her shoulders, and then had to be put back into place. This kept her busy, for there was so much to see that her head was turning all the time. For instance, they were passing the wharves now, each one apparently given over to a special product. Strange-looking dark men were unloading coffee at one wharf, sugar at another, oranges, lemons, and bananas at still another. "It is too bad that Mamma, Papa, and Michel cannot be here to see all of this," Celeste said, giving her head an impatient twist so that her braids flew back into position. "They must finish the packing," Perry reminded her sensibly. This, of course, was true, but even had the packing been completed long ago, Celeste suspected her older sister would not have enjoyed the experience of approaching their new homeland, as she and Perry were now doing. Michel had not wished to leave France. She had wanted to stay in the village of her birth, and continue helping Mamma tend the small shop where pins, needles, threads, and notions of all sorts were sold. "I wonder," Perry had asked now, almost as if he had read Celeste's mind, "if Michel is still mooning around for Louis Bouteille." "Oh, of certainty," Celeste told him firmly. It was a prospect most likely. At 17, Michel fancied herself in love with this Louis Bouteille, a neighbor who had worked on the farm next to Papa's. Once they were in America, Celeste must remember to say farm. "If only he'd been smart enough to learn English, as we did," Perry said, not without smugness, "he might have come with us." "We had Uncle Philip to teach us," Celeste reminded Perry. "Uncle Philip might have taught Louis had he been willing to learn," Perry said. This Celeste could not deny. Uncle Philip had been seen to it that Michel, Perry, and Celeste had learned to speak English almost as soon as they had learned to talk French. He had even included Mamma and Papa in his teaching. If only Louis had learned as Uncle Philip had tried to make him do, he probably could have come along to America, to buy himself a farm large beyond any dreams he might have of owning land in France. That was what Papa was going to do. In fact, the whole matter seemed so very like a dream that during the past weeks Perry would sometimes awaken in the night, thinking he must be back in his bed in the Danton home in France. Then he would hear the sound of the ship slipping along through the water, and know of a certainty that he was traveling toward America. When he mentioned the matter to Celeste, she admitted she also had dreams occasionally. I was glad when I awakened and found I had been dreaming, Perry told her. And I also, Celeste said. There was no question of dreaming now. It was all very real. Do you suppose, Celeste asked hopefully, that we shall see Indians and cowboys? Not in New Orleans, Perry told her with such a conscientious superiority that she was sorry she had asked. I questioned Charles on the matter when he visited us, and he said, most certainly not. And he probably laughed at you for asking such a stupid question, Celeste thought. But she refrained from saying so. When Charles, together with his father, Uncle Henry, and his mother, Tante Margareta, who was Mamma's sister, had come to France for a visit 3 years ago, they had done little else besides tell wonderful stories about the new land of theirs, this United States of America. No wonder Celeste had expected to find Indians and cowboys waiting on the shores, along with all the other marvelous sights that Bonneville's had described. Uncle Henry had been born in America, of French parents, true, but still he was an American. Tante Margareta had gone to live there after she had married Uncle Henry. Charles also was born in America. There was not enough money in the world to pay any of them, so they declared, to leave and come back to France to live. The Dantons were all quite prepared to believe the stories the Bonnevilles had told, because already they had heard many of them from Uncle Philippe, who had once gone to America, to a place called Texas, to order to help start a colony of French people. He had hurt himself very badly in attempting to build a thing called a log cabin. Because of the injury, he was forced to come back to France to live, staying with the Dantons, since he was Papa's only brother, and had never married. For the rest of his life he sat in a wheelchair, telling tales about Texas, seeming to like it none the less because he had been injured there. One of the first words Perry learned to say was Texas, although Uncle Philippe had told him he did not pronounce it quite right. When Uncle Philippe had died almost a year ago, he had left Papa a small heritage. With the money there was a note. While I will not lay it on you as a command, Uncle Philippe had written, I could wish you would see fit to invest this in Texas land. So, what was there for Papa to do but to write letters to Texas asking about land? Such a great number of folders came back that Papa was forced to spend many hours studying them. Finally, he chose the advertisements of one land company which seemed best to him. He had asked the mayor, the postmistress, and the schoolmaster in the village to check as well. While this was going on, both Celeste and Perry grew impatient. I'm afraid we will not go at all, she sighed. I can tell you something, Perry had said confidently. We will go. Papa is as anxious to be off as we are. In this Perry had of course been correct, a fact which was a source of pride to him now as the ship made her careful way up the Mississippi River toward New Orleans. All along he had known Papa would decide to come to America. It is a very exciting thing that this is happening to us, Celeste said. Oui, Perry replied, then corrected himself quickly. But yes, a very exciting thing. At this time it was well to remember to speak English only. Indeed, it was an exciting experience. Here they were, the Danton family, preparing to make a new start in a new land in a century that was also new, since this was 1901. Someone had insisted that 1900 was the starting of the 20th century, but there were yet others who were equally as sure as the beginning did not come until 1901. Either way, it was quite young. Both Celeste and Perry remembered the sound of whistles and the ringing of church bells, which had greeted their coming in of the new year in France on both occasions. Now, as if their very thoughts had set off the clamor, they heard the sound of bells and whistles in the distance, coming from the direction of New Orleans. "What could be happening?" Celeste asked in amazement. "Perhaps it is to welcome us?" Perry suggested, grinning impishly. "No doubt," Celeste remarked calmly. "You sent word ahead suggesting this, and naturally we are the first French family ever to arrive in New Orleans." It was Perry's time to remain silent, knowing full well that many French people landed each year in New Orleans. Some came to visit relatives. Many stayed to make new homes for themselves in America. The sound of the whistles and the bells continued as Papa and Mamma and Michel came up on deck to join Perry and Celeste. "What is going on?" Mamma asked. "No doubt they welcome us," Michel said. She spoke almost the exact words used by Perry earlier, but she neither looked nor sounded happy. Michel had been in a bad mood all the way over, which was a shame, for she was really a very pretty girl, with golden hair and brown eyes, fair skin. She resembled Mamma. Perry and Celeste were more like Papa, having blue eyes and dark brown hair. Of course, Perry was a head taller than Celeste, and also Celeste had a little tilted nose which in no way resembled Perry's nice straight one. Uncle Philippe used to say that she got the nose from running around trying to sniff out adventures. Both Perry and Celeste wondered why Mamma and Papa were not more stern with Michel in her ill humor. They themselves could not have got by with such actions. "Unless you are of a more cheerful disposition, they will regret their welcome," Perry told Michel, speaking as he would have addressed one much younger than himself. By the time the Marie Lavaliere had finally edged into the proper place, the bells and whistles were silent, so whatever great occasion had been, it was finished. But Perry, for one, did not waste time regretting this fact. Much excitement still awaited them. He continued to stand straight and tall. Somewhere in the crowd, waiting on the docks, there was sure to be the American cousin Charles, and he might, or might not, have added many inches to his statue since the last time they met. "See!" Papa cried, sounding happy as either Perry or Celeste would have if the discovery had been theirs. "There they are! Uncle Henry and Charles, waving to us!" All the Danton family, with the exception of Michel, began to wave wildly. She made a few restrained and unenthusiastic motions. Plainly, she did not expect much of this new venture upon which the family was engaged, nor yet of the country in which was to be undertaken. But that did not matter really. Celeste and Perry displayed enough excitement for all. Perry could not be sure, but at this distance it looked to him as if Charles were still the shorter of the two. Uncle Henry bundled them all into a hired hack, seeing that the pieces of hand luggage were tied on the back, and they were whisked off to Bonneville home, which was on the street Esplanade. The vehicle stopped at a gateway leading to a courtyard, and Tante Margaretta ran out, flinging open the gate, grabbing them all and kissing them, beginning with Mamma, going back to Mamma again, and then starting all over. And as she kissed them she cried, of course not from sorrow, a fact which was very plain to see. She could scarcely stop kissing them or crying, it appeared. She talked in French, and she said over and over, here was her dear, dear sister. Finally Uncle Henry took a hand and said they must all go inside, or Tante Margarette would wash away the paving stones with her tears or kiss the faces right off her relatives. So then Tante Margarette shooed them inside as if she had been straying chickens. "Wash up," she said, "and come quickly to the table. You must be starved." By and by they were all seated, and Tante Margaretta was putting the soup before them. Everybody was talking at once, but now they quieted down long enough to begin eating. "It was too bad your ship did not arrive earlier," Uncle Henry said, laying his soup spoon down. "We had a great occasion today. President McKinley arrived from Washington for a short visit. We all went to meet his train." Celeste and Perry exchanged glances. So that was the reason for the bells and whistles. Charles looked smug, because he had seen the great man. "Oh, do not say such a thing," Tante Margaret protested. "Just be glad they are here now." She acted as if she might be ready to cry again. "What is in the soup, Margaretta?" Mamma broke in hastily, trying no doubt to head off the weeping. "I have never tasted anything so delicious." "Gumbo," Tante Margaretta told her, so pleased with the compliment that she forgot the tears. "It is a Creole dish. Their cooking is all so good. It has okra and shrimp and hard-shelled crabs. Oh, a great many things." "But the bread is French," Papa said, "and very good indeed." "To be sure," Uncle Henry agreed. "This is a land of blendings. Many countries bring their own ideas, and we combine them all. It is true of various things other than food." "He acts as if he thinks the best of all is right here in New Orleans," Celeste thought. "And now," Uncle Henry asked, turning to Papa, "what is the plan you have? You wrote you had some things in mind when you arrived." "It is to buy a farm," Papa told him. "Good," Uncle Henry approved. "I'm not a farmer myself, but you are. Land is rich here. Farming, I understand, though different from that of France, is still profitable. If you like, I will mention your wish to a friend of mine who deals in real estate." Paris and Celeste felt immediate concern. Was Papa going to allow Uncle Henry to speak to the friend who would doubtless persuade him to remain in New Orleans? "Thank you," Papa said, "but I already have a place in mind." "Where?" "In a region called the Panhandle of Texas," Papa told him. "The Panhandle of Texas!" Uncle Henry shook his head in disbelief. "You will be scalped in your beds!" Tante Margaretta began to cry once more, and this time they were not tears of happiness. "The Indians! I know they are still there." Pierre picked up his ears. He pricked up his ears. He hoped Tante Margaretta was correct. Not about the scalping part, of course, but it would be a great adventure to see Indians. Even he knew they did not scalp people any more. "I'm afraid, dear sister," Papa told Tante Margaretta kindly, "that you have been reading stories about the West of 50 years ago. If there are any Indians, they will be friendly ones, not given to scalping." Charles, who had stopped eating his soup to listen to the part about Indians, again lifted his spoon to his lips, apparently losing interest. Pere cast about his mind for some statement which would renew his cousin's respect for this land, where the Dantons proposed to go. Even as he did so, Papa continued. "You saw how it was with me in France, a small farm. So small, in fact, I did not find it necessary to own a horse of my own in order to cultivate it. When I needed one, I could borrow from a young neighbor. He was always very nice about it." Michelle preened herself a little. Of course she knew Papa referred to Louis Batu, just as she also knew that most likely Louis would never have lent his horse so willingly had not Papa been the father of a pretty, unmarried daughter. Uncle Henry nodded understandingly. "Many times Philippe talked about Texas and the bigness of it. I came to the point where I myself wanted to look. Then, when Philippe died last year..." Papa went on to explain about the wish of Uncle Philippe concerning the small heritage he had left. "What else was there for me to do but to buy the land?" Papa shrugged expressively. "If I recall, Texas was not too kind to Philippe," Uncle Henry remarked casually. "It sent him back to France a cripple." "But even so, he loved it," Celeste thought, not daring to interrupt her elders. "In spite of his injury, he wanted us to go there. Surely it must have been a fine place." Nor, Uncle Henry pointed out, did he himself go to the Panhandle of Texas. "But that is where I could get my best purchase," Papa explained. "Tell him," Papa, "that we want to go there," Celeste urged in her heart. Then another thought came to her. Did they really? Certainly Michelle had no wish to go. And perhaps, although she said nothing, Mamma? Celeste eyed her mother narrowly, but Mamma went right on eating her supper, quiet and serene and unmoved. "I suppose," Papa said, laughing a little, "that I myself am truly the one who wants this. For so long I am crowded on my small farm in France. I have craved room to stretch out in. In the panhandle of Texas, I will have a truly large place. One so big it'll be necessary for me to own my own horses. Harry noticed that Charles had once more laid down his spoon in order to listen. Well, Uncle Henry told him, if it's room you want, you'll have it there. A great plenty of it, perhaps more than you have bargained for, my greedy brother-in-law. As for myself, you cannot pay me to go. Everyone laughed then. Perret remembered Uncle Henry had said the same thing about living in France. Evidently, he wanted to be nowhere save New Orleans. Oh dear, Tante Margaretta scolded them. You are letting the food get cold. Eat now, and later we will talk of more of unpleasant things. Perry and Celeste both regarded her sharply. So she considered going to Texas an unpleasant thought. Uncle Henry had also questioned Papa's wisdom. They shifted their gaze to Mamma. Her mouth was a little tight. Celeste felt perhaps her hand trembled as she raised her napkin to her lips. Brother and sister looked at each other, signaling the fear which had occurred to both of them. Perhaps, after all, the Dantons would not go to Texas. At that moment the food ceased to be as good to them as it had been before. They were relieved when finally, after what seemed like hours, Tante Margaret said, Your children may be excused. Charles, take your cousins into the sitting room and entertain them. Charles obediently led Celeste and Perry into the pleasant sitting room, with its ferns and jardine, and the chairs with their antimacassars and the pictures of ancestors hanging on the walls. The three of them sat down and regarded each other stiffly. Finally, Charles cleared his throat, evidently realizing that as a host, much depended upon him. It was a lot of fun seeing the president today, he said. Yes. Perry did not want to act as impressed as he felt. He did not fool Celeste at all. Quite well she knew he was disappointed, as she herself was. It would have been a wonderful thing to see a real live president, doubtless riding in a coach of gold and surrounded with footmen in livery. She had read of such things. There was a lot of soldiers, Charles continued. On horseback? Perry asked casually. No, Charles admitted. Then, apparently unable to contain his curiosity, he went on. Will you really have horses in Texas? You heard what Papa said, Perry reminded him grandly. How else would we be able to farm the great amounts of land we have? If we have it, Celeste was thinking. It might be well if we were to talk very little about this land until it's truly ours. Evidently, the same thought had occurred to Charles. Oh, come on now, he said lightly. You may not go at all. Maybe my papa will get your papa a job in New Orleans, and you'll stay right here. Perry, although struck with the truth of his cousin's statement, was not going to admit it. It is for the purpose of going to Texas that we came to America, he pointed out. Once there, we will have horses. As Papa said. Charles looked almost convinced. At any rate, he decided to change the subject. How would you like to see the president? He asked. That would be impossible, Perry retorted, but his eyes gleamed with interest as he spoke. He came today before we landed, and is doubtless gone by now. Well, of course I know he came today. I was at the station and saw the whole business. For the moment, Perry had no retort. Plainly, this was almost as big a thing as owning a horse. Charles was looking smug and proud, knowing he had scored a small victory. There is a way you could see him tomorrow, Charles declared, looking at them as if he only had half decided to let them in on the secret. Celeste could bear it no longer. Oh, please, Charles, she cried. Please do tell us. Perry looked his gratitude. Much as he wanted to know, he would not have begged for the information. Tomorrow he goes to the Cabildo, Charles began. The Cabildo? A large building across from Jackson Park, where meetings are held. He will be received there by the important people of the town. If you want to go, I'll ask Mamma if I can take you to watch as he arrives. That would be kind of you, Charles, Celeste told him gratefully. I too would like it, Perry admitted. Thank you. Oh, that's all right, Charles said, trying hard to remain modest in an effort almost entirely without success. Horses, his attitude seemed to say. What are horses compared with the wonderful things we have here in New Orleans?